Hi, Mr. Oldfield. Hello,
Hey
Mr.
there.
Oldfield.
Good morning.
With regards to the agenda, and the event for today, we will begin with some welcome remarks from the panel secretariat, followed by remarks from the panel co-chairs. Following that, we'll have a brief video with regards to the high-level panel report. And after that, we'll then sort of move into a presentation by the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs. After that, we will have some remarks from the Honorable Minister Mike Mposha, Department of Water and Sanitation. And then we will move into our dialogues that we have planned for today. So there are two key dialogues that we have to discuss some of the key actions that have arisen from the development of the draft investment action plan. The dialogue will focus around these key actions, as well as a discussion around some of the potential finance mechanisms to help achieve some of the high-level panel targets towards raising and mobilizing the US dollar 30 billion per year by 2030. Then we'll hand over to the government of the Republic of Senegal to give close of the event. Thank you. Perhaps we can hand over to opening remarks from the African Union Commission. We have Mr. Hassan Nyambe, who is online. Mr. Nyambe? Mr. Nyambe, are you online?
Thank you. Yes, I am, and I would want to take this opportunity to appreciate or to register rather appreciation to your excellencies, who have been able to attend this event. And I'm actually speaking on behalf of Her Excellency, Ambassador Josepha Sako, who is the Commissioner responsible for Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy, and Sustainable Environment at the African Union Commission. She would have wanted to be in this meeting, but unfortunately, due to some emergencies, she has not been able to do so. And in the same vein also, just to convey the warm greetings as well as words of support and commitment from His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, who takes the water agenda very seriously. And as you are all aware, water is actually an engine of our development, and there's no sector that can actually survive without water security. And we have actually come to realize that on our continent, water is actually a limiting factor to our development, and actually water insecurity rather. It actually also threatens to derail our plans to achieve the aspirations of our Agenda 2063, as well as the SDGs within the continent. And it's for this reason that we are actually grateful to the high-level panel that has actually set the agenda for water investments within the continent, to which we all subscribe. And we would also want to commend them actually for the launch or the event that launched the high-level campaign. That launched the report rather, the high-level report that was held in March 2023 during the UN Water Conference. And therefore we look forward to the SDG Summit that is scheduled for September, whereby the campaign itself will be launched, which is entitled Mind the Gap in Water Investment. It is therefore against this backdrop that today we are embarking on yet another milestone of the Water Investment Program, which is the consultation on the Water Investment Action Plan. And we are convinced that this action plan will provide a roadmap for the continent in terms of mobilizing the much needed investments, as well as making sure that all our member states are able actually to align their investment plans with the action plan itself. And would also want to assure you that as the African Union Commission, we remain committed to supporting the program itself and to support the campaign too. And it's for this reason that we have also provided for this initiative during the Africa Climate Summit that will be taking place in Nairobi from 4 to 6 September. And on this note, allow me to congratulate and express a word of appreciation to the Sherpas, to all the partners, the advisory group, the secretariat and conveners, the task support unit that is also based at Global Water Partnership Southern Africa, as well as our own entity, which is Auda NEPAD. And on that note, allow me to wish you all fruitful deliberation. I submit.
Thank you very much, Director Nyambe, for those opening remarks. We'd now like to call on Dr. Mohamed Diatta, who is the Sherpa to the panel co-chair, His Excellency Macky Sall, President of the Republic of Senegal.
Your Excellency, established guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be here today representing Senegal at this important high-level session at the margin of Stockholm International Water Week. This agenda of this event is relevant to this week, could not be more important. Water security and investing on water infrastructure are crucial for Africa's development. On behalf of the Minister of Water and Sanitation of the Republic of Senegal, I would like to welcome you to this consultation meeting Allow me, first of all, to convey the deep regrets of the Honorable Selim Baicha, Minister of Water and Sanitation, who had planned to be physically with us here in Stockholm, but a governmental agenda may not be possible for him to be here. As you know, water, sanitation, and hygiene are fundamental to Africa's social and economic transformation. Indeed, safely managed water and sanitation are essential for Africa to make a quantum leap in industrialization and development. But progress has been slow in reaching our continental and global water targets. As highlighted in the AMCAO Ngor 2023 report and WASMO 2022 report on the implementation of July 2080 Sharm el-Sheikh Declaration, as a continent, Africa is not on track to meet the targets agreed for water and sanitation. Indeed, reports indicate that nearly 400 million people in Africa have no access to drinking water. Approximately 800 million people in Africa do not have access to safely managed basic sanitation and hygiene services. This situation has serious consequences for the achievement of Africa's Sustainable Development Agenda and consequently for the African Union Agenda 2063. This means that the report Africa Rising Investment Tide, issued by the International High-Level Panel on Water Investment in Africa, comes just at the right time. It provides crucial insight, as well as concrete path for mobilizing fundings to develop the blue infrastructure in Africa, where the water infrastructure gap remains a major challenge and on the continental development. The action plan we are submitting for your consideration this morning has the advantage of reflecting our determination to meet these challenges. We need to make it more concrete by proposing bankable and relevant projects from all Africa region. In Senegal, we are committed to funding solutions to this issue and strengthening our water resilience. We are already implementing measures to strengthen our water infrastructure and build resilience to climate change. We have launched several initiatives to improve water management, including the development of national water policy and an action plan to finance water infrastructure by 2050. And on the global stage, this is why His Excellency President Macky Sall, as chair of African Union in 2022, co-convened a panel in March 2022 and brought together global leaders at COP27 in support of the African Investment Program on Water. The African Investment Program on Water shows what is possible when partners come together with a common purpose to scale and accelerate water security. We are making progress, but not so much more must be done. Global support for water infrastructure in particular needs to be scaled up. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate that water security and climate adaptation are among the most significant challenges facing Senegal, facing Africa, and facing the world. The African Investment Program on Water is a critical tool in our arsenal to combat this challenge. But we need more support from the international community to scale up this program and implement more water projects on the ground. Together, let's work toward a more water secure for Africa. Thank you for your kind attention.
Many thanks, Dr. Diatta. I'd now like to call upon Mr. Henk Ovink, who is the first Special Envoy for International Water Affairs for the Kingdom of the Netherlands, to come and give his opening remarks.
Thank you so much. The first, but not the last. Sorry. Indeed, the first appointed close to 9 years ago, handing over this month to Meike van Ginneken, who's going to be the second water envoy for the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and me en route to something else. It's been a pleasure and honor to be part of the African Investment Program and the initiative, as well as the high-level panel from the beginning, coming from the high-level panel on water, where we work closely with our African partners, and Senegal as one, South Africa and many others, to deep dive into the challenges we face when it comes to water security for all in every place around the world. Not an easy challenge. Many obstacles in front of us still that we face. So I want to compliment, I think I can say Alex in person for his dedication, commitment, but also his leadership, and continue to bring us together over and over again in the past years, as well as President Kikwete, former president, who together with all of us, and nobody does this alone, of course, were able to continuously bring us together. And I think, of course, thanks and compliments to the leadership, President Macky Sall from Senegal, from the beginning championing the African high-level panel. And coming in, we were, of course, there, in Namibia, and with that leadership, that collective effort, I think we are definitely on the road to working together and progressing this. I'd like to make 3 points at this beginning of this panel. Next to thanking you all and being with us, and thanking everyone involved in the African Union, the African countries, the leadership from Africa, our partners from across the world, that we're here. I think there's an important but also very realistic starting point to make, is that the bulk of the finance will need to be mobilized from domestic resources. I think that's one of the main assessments that comes from the report. Meaning that improving efficiencies and the governance, how we spend the money in the water domain, is essential. And this needs to happen country by country, utility by utility. We see that public expenditure reviews by the World Bank show an average water sector minister spends less than 75% of their annual budget. Less than 75%. That get allocated by parliament. There's no point in increasing budget if we're not able to even spend what we already have. If there is not the capacity across the utilities, the governments, the private sector, the communities, to absorb that budget. The absorption capacity needs attention first. In the context that we know there's not enough money there if we don't even spend what we already have. More money will not drive implementation. We have to reduce non-revenue water and utilities from the current 50% or more at present to half that number at least. That's equally important. Fix the pipes. It would contribute substantially to making those utilities creditworthy. So it's not only good for actually getting water out to the communities and the economies that are in dire need for that safe water. In the context of finance, non-revenue water is undermining credibility and creditworthiness. And repurposing subsidies that now mostly end up supporting the top of the income pyramid, while the bottom of the income pyramid receives the least of support. So 3 main comments from my first. Part of that is developing new sources in the form of investment in improved water stewardship by industries across their value chain, including in agriculture. Taxing industries and agriculture activities that degrade water. And both raising taxes and investments in water stewardships are contentious, also in the Netherlands, where we're no safe place. because they will raise prices of goods for consumers. But it is in line also with the recommendations for the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, and an absolute requirement to be able to cope with climate pressures on the wash sector. Third and last point, the money is there. We know that with certainty. The challenge for implementing the recommendations from the high-level panel report is and has always been to match the potential sources on the supply side with the relevant demand side measures. How difficult can it be to have program pipelines for the sector beyond infrastructure? Without the demand side measures, the supply is unlikely to materialize. But I'd like to make one point here. Around the world, not only in Africa, around the world, north and south, east and west, at any scale, we spend a large amount of the 75% you could say, of our investment on the wrong projects. IPCC tells us that 99% of global investment go into projects that increase climate change, one, and second, make us more vulnerable. So increasing our efficiency and effectiveness to stupid infrastructure will only make our planet more worse and our economies and societies more vulnerable. So we have to change course on many ways. Absorbing capacity must be matched with talented capacity and leadership and partnership to develop those pipelines that are beyond future-proof, that while building and securing institutional and individual capacity, we help to transition to a just, sustainable, and resilient future. I know, it's a lot, but I also know we're not alone. And I think that is the core of the matter here. We understand the challenges far better. The report and the assessment, as well as the pathway forwards, in the context of the coalition we have in place, provide us an opportunity for that change so much needed. And we, the government from the Netherlands, me, myself, as well as my successor, Meike van Ginneken, and the Departments of Foreign Affairs and Infrastructure and Water, stand ready to work with you to start to implement those recommendations and get them to scale and replication. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ovink, and we'd like to thank you for your leadership over these years in the run-up to the UN 2023 Water Conference. We echo your sentiments that indeed we should all be water ambassadors. I'll now hand over to Mr. Alex Malabwe to welcome the next speaker for the official opening.
Well, thank you, Shamiso. It is my honor and pleasure to acknowledge the previous speakers, and thank you very much for the recognition from the Kingdom of Netherlands. Much appreciated. And as you stress, it takes a village to raise a child, an African child, and so is the case for water. So thank you very much for that recognition, but also the many experts that are here and online. And also really from the Secretariat, special recognition to the African Union Commission, the leadership that they have led, particularly through the chairperson, Musa Faki, as well as the Commissioner, Josepha Sako. But really at the technical level, we've been guided by the Director, Hassan Nyambe, who also provided the opening remarks. So for now, it is my pleasure to invite a representative of one of the leaders of the high-level panel, His Excellency Hage Geingob. I think just for me to say something here is that His Excellency Hage Geingob was the first head of state who accepted to join the high-level panel and was very generously persuaded by the Honorable Minister of Water, who is also representing me here, who was also then AMCO President of the African Ministers Council on Water. His Excellency Hage Geingob gave inspiration that led us to establishment of the panel, and of course, joined by the other leaders, President Macky Sall as co-chair, and His Excellency Mark Rutte, Prime Minister of the Netherlands, and the head of the GWP Africa Secretariat, His Excellency Jakaya Kikwete, the former president of Tanzania, who is also leads us at the Secretariat, which I head. Now, the next speaker is also, we are very fortunate because today's issue is about not only water, but finance and investments. The Honorable Minister, Shetwin from Namibia, is a former Minister of Finance. He's not just a Minister of Water, he's a former Minister of Finance. He's also a former senior official in the Ministry of Finance. So he knows the numbers, he knows the issues of investments, and he knows the challenges. So we're very, very fortunate, but he's also held other portfolios as Minister of Trade. So we are in very good hands today as we begin to talk about the issue of investments and finance. And it is my singular honor now to invite the Honorable Carl Eman Shetwin to deliver the opening remarks and also officially open on behalf of the co-chairs. Honorable Minister.
Mr. Alex Simalabi, thank you very much. And I need to convey the greetings of my president, His Excellency Hage Geingob, to this gathering. We are very happy to be giving the opportunity to be part of this important panel. Thank you very much. Mr. Mohamed Diatta, thank you for joining us here. Mr. Henk Ovink, we have met recently and we had a visit of your Prime Minister in Namibia, who showed very keen interest to make real an opportunity of green hydrogen in the country. So we are seeing that words start to get meaning when we engage at these levels. So thank you very much. Honorable Mike Boposha, Minister of Water Development and Sanitation of Zambia. Mr. Juma Hamidu, the representative of President Kikwete, I take it. Dear investors, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very honored to be here today and give you some remarks at the opening event of this panel, and with it, the opportunity to table our proposal for investments into the water agenda. Indeed, the topic of accelerating the implementation of the UN 2023 Water Agenda Action Plan in Africa through the International High-Level Panel, that is we, on Water and Investment Action Plan, is a right and correct and timely topic that we are discussing. The high level that consists of the four presidents, as you have heard, it's President Geingob, President Macky Sall, President Kikwete, and Prime Minister Rudd, came out with a proposal that governments in Africa should increase their public spending by 20% out of public sources dedicated to the water sector. But not only the water sector, that is the infrastructure that supplies water, but it should also include sanitation as an equally important component in the water agenda. During the UN Water Conference, the AUC and the high-level panel launched the high-level panel's landmark report, that is Africa's Rising Investment Tide, which defines pathways for mobilizing additional $30 billion US dollar to close the water investment gap in Africa through the Continental Water and Investment Program, that is the AIP. Currently under development, the high-level panel investment action plan will define specific actions needed to mobilize these 30 million per year by 2030. In addition, financing towards water supply, security, and sustainable sanitation in Africa. That's the target area that we need. Now, part of this action plan was noted as one of the significant outcomes of the UN 2023 Water Conference. The review of the draft high-level panel water investment plan is before us. Financing mechanisms and actions for implementation, the AIP has as the high-level panel water investment action plan. So we have the plan, but we have also an action plan. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to add that while one recognizes the need for this ambitious plan, and while the outcome of the UN Water 2023 conference and the action plan for Africa is pointing in the right direction, we have to recognize that the world is facing a three-faceted crisis in which we have to operate. First, we face a climate change crisis. The effects are now clearly visible, with droughts, floods, wildfires, all of which the intensity has increased markedly, with out-of-season storms and consequent flooding, with unprecedented heat waves, with glacier melting, rising of oceans. There are many, and we know them all, impacts that we are now actually feeling that is with us. And our financing of water agenda goes beyond the run-of-the-mill needs. It must be taken on board within the climate change agenda. Because I dare say, and everyone knows that, the water cycle is central to climate change. When climate changes, the water cycle changes. When that changes, water availability or water abundance is directly affected. And that affects our lives. All these climate changes are having severe effects on the water cycle, making secure water supply more difficult, more expensive, and often out of reach for developing countries. Shortfalls in the required funding to address climate change and related water cycle aspects remain significant. The proposal to step up domestic financial resources is therefore pivotal. But we must be reminded that it is by no means a silver bullet that is solving everything. We are facing a global crisis which requires global solution, and that includes the solutions to the financial needs in the water agenda as a whole. Secondly, we indeed have a financial crisis. The current international financial architecture shows its age, and in our opinion is no more able to deal with a globalized world and its problems. Currently, the debt crisis, exchange trends, and the weaponizing of the financial rules are fueling inequality. They are not solving the problems. They are fueling some of the problems that we already struggle to solve. They make the future prospects for developing economies more difficult and often push the targets out of reach with current financing envelopes available. This is especially relevant for Africa, with its youthful population, where a conducive economic climate for quality economic growth and job creation is indeed much needed. That is pushed further away with the financial crisis unfolding. We need it to ensure the prosperity of our children and future generations. And thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, we believe, or we are certain, we know, that we are in a political crisis with war, with political instability on the rise. The multilateral system of the UN is equally seriously skewed and no longer fit for purpose, with the majority of the global citizens excluded from decision-making. Our own continental body, the AU body, lacks the necessary decisiveness to address continental potential of instability. Economic and other resources scarcity increase the possibility of conflict, and water scarcity is one of them. The ability to solve transboundary disputes becomes less likely when political instability is prevalent. After all, we know that development is not possible without political stability. And we believe that political stability is facing a global crisis at the moment. Our ambitions to address and bring about safe and secure water supply for all, to provide sanitation to enable development and decent urban and rural living standards for all, both are impacted by these global trends. And I urge you, therefore, to factor these crises into our agenda when we discuss the financing of the water agenda. Having said all that, we must, of course, remain optimistic. We must face these troubled times and create opportunities which live up to our responsibility to leave behind for the youth, our children, a world which had rid itself from the intense difficulties that we indeed have created. Africa has massive opportunities. They include her enormous resource wealth, including water, her potential to become the breadbasket of the world. Our agricultural potential is huge. Her youthful population, her potential for green energy, and that is to mention only a few. We must now seize the moment to convert this potential into reality. We must pave the way for environmental sustainability while we industrialize, for political stability, to move or to more evenly distribute the wealth, the benefits, and the economic opportunities. As the high-level committee, as responsible investors, we have to show the way out of these crises instead of deepening them. Let us be the leaders who lead everyone out of trouble. The proposed action plan is a first step towards implementing Africa's agenda and implementing the UN 2023 Water Action Plan. And I congratulate those who developed it. I think the walk is long, the walk will be troubled, but the walk is worthwhile walking, because what you see at the destination will be something very good, in fact, very necessary. And with those few words, I have the privilege to open this gathering and launch the report. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I think he's raised a lot of issues, many issues. I think, as I said earlier, we are very fortunate to have leaders like the Honorable Minister, who, as I said at the beginning, he was the pioneer of the high-level panel establishment. And I recall, Honorable Minister, one of the questions you asked was, okay, are we going to be asking African governments to get loans? Because that's the only way we can get this kind of money. Where is the money going to come from? And those questions were deliberated by the Sherpas and reflected in the panel report. So we're going to hear now from another leader from Zambia, the Honorable Minister Mike Mposha, who is the Minister of Water, who has also been one of the pioneers in responding to the call of the high-level panel on water for developing of national water investment programs and commitments at the national level. As we heard from the Special Envoy from the Netherlands, the bulk of resources will have to come from national governments. And as we heard from the Honorable Minister, we need to take into account the political climate we are in at the moment. There is a war going on, not only within the Baltic here, where we are close to Ukraine, Russia, but also the global war going on water and climate change. As the climate changes, water changes. That's what the Honorable Minister says. So it is now my honor to invite the Honorable Minister of Water Development and Sanitation in Zambia to respond specifically to the issue of African governments and the issue of budgets, domestic resource mobilization. Honorable Minister Mike Mposha, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Allow me to also recognize and appreciate the presence of their excellencies, honorable ministers, and all distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm very grateful to be given this opportunity to join you all in this meeting and be given an opportunity to give the Zambian perspective regarding the global consultation on accelerating implementation of the UN 2023 Water Action Agenda in Africa through the high-level panel on Water Investments Action Plan. Chair, I take note of the topic for this meeting this morning, which is that the high-level panel has proposed that an additional $2 billion United States dollars per year be mobilized from African governments through a 20% budget increase to water security and sanitation. And therein lies the question, is this feasible in our country or in our countries? The second one is, what challenges do we foresee, and what is needed to be done to achieve this? Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, let me begin by stating that currently the Zambian government financing to the water and sanitation sector stands at about 2.2 billion kwacha, which translates to about $115,265,000, and that over the past 5 years, the Zambian government has increased the funding to the water and sanitation sector by about 46.1% in kwacha terms, which is kwacha is our local currency, which is equivalent to about 29.3% in United States dollar terms. In this regard, the government of the Republic of Zambia remains committed to supporting water security and sanitation investments in Zambia within the context of the Zambia Water Investment Program by at least $1 billion United States dollars by 2030 through the regular national budget programming. As you may be aware, His Excellency the President of the Republic of Zambia, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, launched the 5.75 United States billion Zambia Water Investment Program for the period 2022 to 2030. The main goal of the Zambia Water Investment Program is to close the water security and sanitation gap in Zambia by focusing on water investments for economic diversification and job creation, resilience building through water, and strengthening of water and the sanitation governance and institutions. And now the question is it possible to mobilize and increase the budget by 20% to the water and sanitation sector? I want to say yes, it is very much possible to increase the allocation by African governments to water and sanitation through their respective national budgets. However, this will not come so easily on account of many competing needs from other sectors such as health, education, agriculture, and social welfare programs, just to mention but a few. In addition, the water sector has not been very well positioned at articulating its financing requirements in a manner that can compel more effectively the ministries of finance to prioritize their allocations to water and sanitation above other priorities. This is largely as a result of limited water data and statistics that can showcase the contribution of water and sanitation to the economy and the impact of economic activities on water resources. In addition, working in silos, fragmentation of efforts and poor coordination among the international cooperating partners have not helped to raise the voice for increased funding to the water and sanitation sector through national governments. In order to overcome these and many other challenges, the need for high-level political leadership, such as the one exhibited by His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zambia, with the launch of the Zambia Water Investment Program, as well as that of other African and global leaders on the high-level panel on water investment in Africa, which cannot be overemphasized. Your Excellencies, emphasis there is on the fact that we require political will. We require political leadership from the presidents, from their cabinets, in order to achieve this. With these few remarks, I wish to end my remarks by thanking you all for your attention and also thanking the conveners of this meeting for this opportunity for Zambia to join in and give our perspective. Thank you so much. I wish you prosperous proceedings at the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister Mike Mposha. I think the short answer is it is possible for governments to increase budgets, but it will not be easy because of the various reasons that have been articulated. And I think these are the issues of the high-level panel in the implementation plan will also try to address in terms of how do you deal with some of the challenges that might not make it possible in terms of the key recommendations to mobilize financing. The high-level panel launched a report, as we heard from the Honorable Minister from Namibia at the UN Water Conference. And of course, the high-level panel, as well as the Africa Water Investment Program, is now very much part of what is called the UN Water Action Agenda at the global level. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Ministers, it is now my pleasure to invite Mr. Tomoyuki Okado from the United Nations Secretariat in New York to give us an update on what has happened since the UN Water Conference and the upcoming plans regarding the UN Water Action Agenda. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to join this international high-level panel on water investments for Africa and introduce the update and next steps on the Water Action Agenda. The historic UN 2023 Water Conference in March gathered some 10,000 participants from over 160 countries to review the first half of the water action decade and identify necessary actions for the second half. A key outcome of the conference is the Water Action Agenda, a set of voluntary commitments announced by countries and stakeholders. The Water Action Agenda aims to mobilize voluntary commitments, scale up the implementation of commitments in countries and across sectors, and follow up and review commitments to learn lessons, measure progress, and encourage new commitments. As of today, 832 commitments are published on the conference website. In 2020, UN Water launched the SDG 6 Global Acceleration Framework, which was used as a backbone of the water conference structure. The framework's 5 accelerators, financing, data and information, capacity development, innovation, and governance are key cross-cutting components to achieve SDG 6 and other water-related SDGs. With financing needs for water investment at hundreds of billions of US dollars annually, the Water Conference highlighted the importance of unlocking financing and innovative funding schemes. Governments are requested to develop policies to guide financing decisions and make best use of finance. The Water Action Agenda is a response to multiple water challenges. About half of the commitments came from NGOs and civil society, followed by about a quarter of the commitments from national governments. Some 60 national governments registered over 180 commitments. About 15% of government commitments are from African countries. Last month, at the first global follow-up on the Water Conference and the Water Action Agenda, the SDG 6 in-depth review session was held during the high-level political forum in New York. In addition, the SDG 6 and Water Action Agenda special event played a significant role in the annual follow-up mechanism. Participants highlighted that global actions and momentum should continue following the success of the Water Conference. Other recommendations include regular global dialogues on water, a UN system-wide strategy, and the appointment of a UN Special Envoy on Water, which all spur implementation of water-related goals and targets. Currently, UN member states are negotiating a new UN resolution on the follow-up of the Water Conference, including periodic Water Conference. UN Water has started a discussion on the UN system-wide strategy. The Special Envoy is still under consideration. The latest UN publication, SDG 6 Synthesis Report on Water and Sanitation 2023, has proposed a blueprint for putting SDG 6 progress on track, and the way the United Nations can support SDG 6 acceleration. As the Secretariat of the UN Water Conference, the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, DESA, is committed to being a partner with Africa and helping countries and stakeholders implement commitments and review the progress with an emphasis on their ownership. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Tom, for that update from the UN Secretariat, and we look forward to the announcement by UN Secretary General of the UN Special Envoy to carry forward the UN Water Action Agenda. And I think in Africa, under the leadership of the African Union, Africa AU Commission, as you can see, we are ready. We are ready to move forward and join forces with the United Nations at the global level to accelerate the implementation of the UN Water Action Agenda. We will soon be going into panel discussions and structured dialogues to reflect on the different financing sources identified by the high-level panel. One of them we have already dealt with, the issue of financing sources from governments. So to introduce that, we will flag off with a video of the high-level panel just to refresh our minds, some of us, about the high-level panel report that was launched and its main recommendations, including the 9 financing sources, after which we'll hand over to our able moderators to lead us into the structured dialogue. So can we please play this video for the high-level panel? Thank you.
Okay, it's time for some dialogue. And I'm very happy to introduce the first dialogue that will be taking place. As mentioned again, this dialogue was really around discussing some of the key points and actions that have arisen as being critical to helping to meet the targets that have been set out by the high-level panel. For our first dialogue, the session will be moderated by Ms. Serene Malik, who is the Executive Secretary for the African Civil Society Network on Water. Serene, let me hand over to you.
Good morning and welcome to all of you here with us in the room today and virtually. So, as Shamisa mentioned, I'm Serene Malik, yes, Executive Secretary of the African Civil Society Network on Water and Sanitation and the Vice Chair for the Sanitation and Water for All Partnership. Without further ado, I'd like to invite my panel, Lisa Rudge, if you could join us. She's online, excellent. Brian, please do come up. Khalifa Sar. Thank you, Khalifa. Od, I can see that you're here. Graham Chingampu. Online. Okay, excellent. And Amgad Al Mahdi. Excellent. Thank you very much for being here. So I'm just going to step down. Just go on this side. Right. Thank you. Can you hear me? All right, good. So thank you very much for being on this panel and really to contribute to what Honorable Schlettlein painted was a very grim picture of what the situation currently is. So the Africa Investment Program has really come to be in a storm. But it also crystallizes, I think, the ambition and the aspirations of this continent to ensure that we are on target, even though the numbers show that we're not there yet. So I would first like to, Lisa, having heard what has already been mentioned, and against that backdrop, just to hear from you, what are really the top actions identified to mobilize, in this case, probably 0.5 billion per year by 2030 through incremental increase, which is allocated to water from bilateral and ODA. Lisa, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Serena, and thank you, honourable ministers, distinguished high-level panelists, chairs and co-chairs. I'm indeed delighted to share with you some of the actions that we discussed as part of the bilateral ODA and philanthropy pathway. I think, firstly, just to reiterate what's already been said, but these actions obviously can't proceed alone. ODA and philanthropic funds cannot be seen in isolation. That was one of the first principles that we discussed. But in terms of actions, firstly, the alignment with the renewed commitment and alignment with principles of aid effectiveness and accountability are really important. These really require ODA and philanthropic funds to be aligned with national plans, and the types of actions that can be supported would be linked to some actions around system strengthening the processes, the regulatory environments, and the data systems, as was mentioned earlier, a huge need, in order to ensure that there's a strong and enabling environment for further investments, and also to support the efficiency and efficacy gains that would be made across other pathways, as mentioned earlier. By, I think, increasing the confidence in the attractiveness of water investments, this could, over time, help increase the confidence in water investments and the attractiveness of the sector for ODA investments. As the SDG 6 synthesis report mentions, the priority investments for water has dropped from rank 7 to rank 11 since 2017. So a positive trend in investments is possible with kind of more efficiency and alignment with national plans. That was the first action. The second one is around de-risking water investments. And of course, that cannot be done in isolation. Again, that has to be done with governments and multi-development banks. So just to reiterate the importance of working together across the different work streams. And lastly, we also discussed how ODA grants should really focus much more on low-income countries, on low-income population groups, in order to ensure that that money is used where others perhaps are not able to invest as much, or ODA funds are better placed. Again, that is in collaboration with governments and the prioritization of where funds should be invested. So those are the three main points in the ODA and philanthropic discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Lisa, my apologies, I did not introduce you properly. So Lisa is the Water and Sanitation and Hygiene Advisor at the UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. And she's also the chair of the Sanitation and Water for All Systems and Finance Working Group. Thank you, Lisa, for those three top points, and probably something that was reiterated in the earlier panel on the issues of governance, de-risking, creditworthiness, but also alignment with national plans. Next, Brian, a pleasure to have you here. So Brian is the director of the Water and Sanitation Hygiene team at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and is currently exploring innovative approaches to increasing urban resilience in the face of climate change. So Brian, not too far off from the question that was asked to Lisa, in terms of, what are the top actions that the foundation is looking at to support increasing and reaching these targets that we've talked about from a financial point of view. Over to you, Brian.
Great. So one of our roles that we see for philanthropic dollars is to invest in approaches that might be higher risk, that other financial contributors can't take those levels of risk. So, for example, our program has invested over $250 million over the last 11 years on innovations that could really, we think, transform what's possible in the sector. Most of those investments don't lead to products, but some of them have. And so, for instance, we now are seeing commercially available products that we call reinvented toilets. If you go to Johannesburg, you can see 3 different companies with 3 different technologies that provide toilets. Some are being demonstrated in schools or in very low-income communities that treat all the pathogens. They're closed loop systems that treat all the pathogens in the waste, recycle the water, so provide a full flush toilet experience, but all in a closed loop. So these are systems that are more resilient in the face of flooding, more resilient in the face of droughts. They actually generate net clean water. And therefore we think provide a lot of benefits for the places that sewer systems and wastewater treatment plants can't reach, and with presumably dramatically less demands on water, on energy, et cetera. So that's an example of what we think philanthropic dollars can do. But I also wanted to call out a couple other things that we are very excited about in the context of this work that we have supported along with many other philanthropies. AMCAL, the African Ministerial Council on Water, a couple of years ago led a very inclusive process to come up with the African Sanitation Policy Guidelines that now are inspiring many African governments to either update or create new policies. We think that's incredibly valuable. And the African Water Facility has come up with a new African Urban Sanitation Investment Initiative that really is focused on solving one of the problems that was called up by the high-level panel, which is improving the implementation capacity and the quality of bankable projects. And so anybody that wants to learn more about that, I understand there's a session tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Brian. Yes, technologies to counter, of course, climate change. And I know that's something that we've been working on quite a bit with the foundation. Over to Khalifa Sarr. So Khalifa is the head of the Office of the Special Envoy of the President of the African Development Bank for the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa. He was previously the Director of Cabinet of the Minister of Economy, Planning and Cooperation of Senegal. He's also worked for Contour Global and Energy Fund and the Senegalese Sovereign Fund prior to that. Khalifa, thank you for being here. Again, coming back to something that Honorable Carl Schlettwein mentioned on financial regulations being weaponized and the enabling environment being slightly skewed, and add on to that vested interests that don't necessarily serve the good of the continent. Against that particular backdrop, Khalifa, what are some of the identified actions that have been thought of to mobilize 2 billion per year, for example, and through higher allocations to WASH, knowing as well that sometimes WASH is not necessarily at the top of the list? Over to you, Khalifa.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, Excellencies, dear participants. I think two main points were made in our group. The first one way to get more resources from government budget is to have more efficiency on what's already available, so that this money can be at least partially recovered and reinvested in this sector. And to achieve that, it is crucial to implement or improve water and sanitation financing strategy and efficiency. Two main ideas. First, as it was already mentioned, is to strengthen the enabling environment for water investment on the continent. This is done through policy, institutional, and regulatory reforms, because a strong enabling environment will help to ensure that the water sectors has the ability to recover cost again, so that the money that is invested by government is efficiently used and investment are adequately maintained, and the money is recovered at least partially and reinvested. We should not give the impression that when we invest in water and sanitation, it is the lost money that is not recoverable. So we have to ensure that the money is partially recovered and reinvested in the sector, and that the economic and financial reforms should include, for example, to gradually strengthen tariffs for water supply and sanitation services. The second point is to provide capacity building within the governments. This is important to improve timely asset management, to reduce operational inefficiencies, speaking about maintenance, because we know that this is leading to leak of money. It's also important to have sound CapEx planning. We should have the visibility over 5 to 10 years to know what is needed, when and where we should invest, so that the money is really efficient. It's also important to put together systems that enable financial tracking and project portfolio reviews. This is extremely important for ensuring impact on the ground. Following each dollar that is invested and doing project portfolio review to ensure that projects we are investing in do not take 10 years to be delivered, but within 2-3 years, they are operational and they start delivering on impact. Again, this is about making sure that we are efficient in our use of money, that we can partially recover money and we can reinvest that money. And this will also provide more visibility and comfort to Minister of Finance, for example, or donors countries to invest more in water, because they would know that their investments are productive and are impactful. We also discussed some ideas to provide African governments with more resources. Some ideas include, for example, debt for water swap. We know that many developing countries have large international debts, and debt services are absorbing a significant proportion of their total budget expenditure, to the detriment of investment needed in water, climate, nature, health, so on and so forth. So in the context of decreasing ODA and of discussion regarding that sustainability in Africa, but also in other developing countries, we should consider solutions like debt for swap water that will help attract more ODA without putting a financial and budgetary burden on donors countries. And this will also free up resources or budget
Khalifa, je
from
m'excuse, je dois vous interrompre. On doit bientôt terminer.
from African countries. I'm done here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Khalifa. My apologies for that. So yes, the issues of governance, policies, but also something you've touched on is that water doesn't move as fast as other sectors, something that is coming up quite a bit in the discussions. Next, yes, on the issue of governance, which has been raised a number of times. And we also do know that, yes, in addition to all the other crisis, the crisis in water is often said to be a governance crisis. So I'd like to invite Aude Farnot. Aude is a policy analyst on water finance and economics at the OECD Environment Directorate, and she leads the roundtable on financing water and previously worked at the French Embassy in Senegal. Aude, over to you, and we'll have to keep it short.
Thank you. Good Chair. So good morning, everyone, Honorable Minister, dear participants. First of all, I'm grateful for the invitation. It's an honor to be here. As we've heard earlier in the consultation, it's not merely about more money. It's about making a more efficient use of the money available and of existing assets. So I'd like to highlight here 4 priorities to enable efficiency gains and cost savings in the water sector, both at the system level and at the service provider level. So the first one is related to the importance of the economic regulation of water and the benefits of putting in place an independent and transparent regulation of the water sector to enable the strengthening of the financial viability of the water sector and the creditworthiness of water utilities. So that's the first point. The second one is around implementing efficient water pricing mechanisms, making sure that pricing and tariffs are cost reflective and that those who can afford to pay are paying the right price for water, while others benefit from social measures, and defining a clear process for setting tariffs, reviewing tariffs or indexing tariffs. My third point is around incentivizing performance in service delivery, putting in place performance-based contracts for service delivery, carrying out regular performance reviews of service providers, monitoring and benchmarking the performance of water utilities with clear KPIs. And my fourth point is around the efficiency of existing assets, but also new assets. For existing assets, the need to invest in capital maintenance to drastically reduce non-revenue water and implement energy efficiency measures. And for new assets, the need to build cost-effective and sustainable infrastructure with efficient operating models. So we'll discuss these key topics and continue to push the boundaries of thinking about financing water-related investments at the 10th meeting of the Roundtable on Financing in Water in Abidjan, 23 November, co-convened with the African Development Bank. So we need your expertise and political leadership to come up with bold and ambitious solutions to reach the 2030 targets. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Aude, and thank you for, yes, the call to action. Indeed, yes, non-revenue water is the bane of this continent, and of course, speaking to the mobilization of local resources, which we all know means to a certain extent the management and the governance within countries. Thank you, Aude, for your contribution. I'd like now to invite Graham Chingambu. Graham is the fund manager for the SADC Water Fund at the Development Bank of Southern Africa. So, Graham, I think this is falls just in line in terms of mobilization of this financing, but also speaking a bit to the domestic mobilization, especially that we know a question was asked, yes, the critics of AIP, why should African governments take more loans? And that is something that's been recurring. Maybe, Graham, you'd like to contribute an input on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think just to start it from the perspective of what is the ethos of development financing. And I think historically we've seen that the key role of development financing has been to be able to deal with and address the market failures. And when it comes to financing for the water sector, there is in many ways a failure of the market. And that failure, as has been mentioned, there are several other things. You can look at what are the policy issues that need to be addressed. One key issues is the implementation capacity constraints that has been highlighted as well. But I think when we talk the financing also, we think particularly in terms of how appropriate actually the funding or the financing instruments that we have to deal with the current macroeconomic environment in the countries. So when you talk domestic resource mobilization, how do you deal with what the governments are already committing and enhance that and complement that in order to draw in more funding towards the water sector? And I think from a development financing perspective, obviously that is one of the challenges. The other is, what do we do better with the grants that we have at hand? Limited resources, but what can we do better to ensure that we are sort of crowding in other financing instruments, other financing actors, and how, which is also a key thing, how do we support the development of appropriate market structures that do not necessarily imply that every financing must be anchored by the government, and that becomes important for domestic resource mobilization. So I would say all in all that we do need to continue to have this coordinated and concerted effort, which is anchored on complementarity. Looking at how we prepare and implement together will be critical, I think, from a multilateral development financing perspective towards the water sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Graham, for those top contributions. And finally, I'd like to introduce Dr. Amgad El-Mahdi, who is the water sector lead at the Green Climate Fund. He's also the chair of the Water Security at International Water Resources Association. Now, Dr. El-Mahdi, yes, we heard that climate change is critical. I mean, we are at crisis level. I think it was beautifully said, when the climate changes, the water changes as well. So what is actually needed in terms of top actions, and how do we scale up climate finance for innovation on this continent? Over to you, Dr. El-Mahdi.
Thanks, Rina, and good morning, everyone, and distinguished panelists and speakers. So I would like to take this again as a complementary to what has been said, and to define really the interconnectivity of all several actions. I think it's access to climate finance using its concessionality and de-risk of the water investment can definitely contribute to increase and leverage finance to the water sector, while also contributing to the adaptation mitigations agenda under Paris Agreement. But to address climate change or the challenge with the climate change, and we have defined in the task team like a series of actions that have been carefully developed. But today I just wanted to really highlight three as absolute critical actions. And the first one is really like the integration of water into National Adaptation Plan and National Determined Contribution, the NDCs. The priority lies in placing the water as a heart of NAB and NDCs. This really strategic move to recognize the critical role of water management, not only in tackling climate change, but also in formulating adaptive strategy at the national level. And by doing so, that will incorporate really the intrinsic value of water as a cornerstone in our battle against climate impact. The second action is really like strengthening the interministerial and government donor coordinations for smart water investment. In our hunt for smart investment project that really address the climate adaptation mitigation, the enhancement of that coordination across government departments, donors become really a paramount for all of us. By synergizing the efforts, we not only ensure the efficient implementation of those water investment initiative, but also really pave the way for harnessing diverse financial sources, including the private sector engagement. This approach really maximizing the resource impact and catalyze the transformative potential of water-related project. The third action is really like developing and communicating the evidence on water-climate linkage. It's central to our endeavor in that dissemination of tangible evidence that interpreting the complex relationship between water and climate. This dissemination really serves to enhance the awareness of the critical role of water that play in realizing developing goals. Such evidence of the based decision-making lead really to multifaceted gain across the sector. And to further complement this, we really need to advocate again on a global scale for increasing climate fund allocation for Africa, amplifying the vital importance of water in this context. So those three actions collectively forge really a cohesive strategy marked by sharp awareness, seamless integration of water priorities into national strategies, improved coordination for impactful implementation, and also the stimulation of innovative investment paradigm or water investment, such as like treating water as a new asset class for increasing climate finance for water. And we have one great example of one project for that being approved last month for 1.5 billion in South Africa. This approach not only to ensure efficient allocation of climate fund for water-related project, but also to force us really toward a more resilient and sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. El-Mahdi. And thank you to the panel for your valuable contributions and insights. I believe the water sector in Africa is in good hands. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Shamiso for the second panel from Ms. Jae Young-soo. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the panelists and to you, Serene, for your excellent moderation. We'd like to engage in some discussion as part of this process. So before I hand over to you, Jay, I'm just wondering if there are any comments that the audience members might have. Oh, yes.
Thank you. My name is Henk Holtzag from the Netherlands. I work with Meta Smart Center Group, which is a group in 9 countries on water training. And I would like to make 2 observations. One is water quality. Last year, Henk Oving mentioned a bold idea on the Stockholm Water Forum at a final speech, which was called 2 with 8. It is a bold idea that says that the 2 billion people worldwide that do not have safe drinking water can have safe drinking water with $8 billion, just $4 per person. So for Africa, that would cost $1.6 billion. And this is based on a study that was done by the WHO that says the importance of household water treatment. So everywhere where people do not have safe water, you can treat it at the household level with a range of options. The most effective is water filters. And with this approach 2 with 8, it is possible to have safe water in Africa for $1.6 billion. So that is one. The second one is, as was mentioned, innovation and capacity building. There is a lot of innovation in house and water technologies, in well drilling, in pumps, in solar pumps, in treatment, in storage, that is not spread. So it's known in one country and it's unknown in other countries. So by a large scale, South-South exchange of knowledge, this knowledge can spread over Africa and it can reduce the cost of rural water supply, especially I focus on rural water supply, by 50% or more. So with this, I would also like to call for the investment of a large scale building of a capacity of the local private sector in locally produced water technologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Henk. Any other questions from the audience or comments from the audience members? We'll take one more. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Maurice from WaterAid. I need to make a reflection around the climate change impact. So we are looking at decision makers to invest more, but in most of countries, do we know the status of services and the status of infrastructures? Because of the climate change, most of infrastructures get washed away, and most of time in national management information systems and weren't working in the countries. So I think as we talk about investing more in water, we also need to invest in management information system, making sure that decision makers have most accurate data to help decision making. It's important. Second is about sanitation. Of course, we're talking about water, but back to my colleagues who mentioned about water quality. It is really difficult to separate water and sanitation in the context of Africa, with flooding. Most of toilet, mostly pits, toilet are washed away, contaminating water bodies. And again, the issue of quality of water comes as a major challenge. So how really do we make sure that you have in place mechanism of sanitation financing? We know sanitation is mostly financed by households, but most of households in Africa don't have that capacity of building a climate resilient toilet for the family. How do we make sure that we creatively work with private sector of banks to put in place products that help household access funds to make resilient the sanitation infrastructure to avoid threatening the water quality? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We also have a question from an participant online, and I think it also sort of echoes this question that was asked. How can we think and work differently to improve the outcomes of investments in water supply, sanitation, and hygiene, particularly for people in ASAL and conflict-infested regions in Africa? I think this is something definitely to ponder, and maybe Jay, you can also take this up as you moderate the next dialogue. Let me hand over to Jae-Young So, who is the chair of the Technical Committee for Global Water Partnership.
Thank you, Shamiso. The fundamental success of a public-private partnership in any sector is a very strong public sector. And I think in the first dialogue, we heard from public sector, both government and non-government sources, on how they could really contribute to the AIP. In this second dialogue, we're going to be hearing from a number of the private potential investors in the water sector. We have quite a few number of speakers in the second dialogue, but we thought that they were very critical to provide the diversity of views in the private sector. So we have 4 members of the task team that have been working on specific components of the investment landscape. Then we have representatives from the World Bank and the African Development Bank. And Mike, if you'd like to come and join the panel here in the chair next to Asarine. And then we will pass over to our government representatives to give a reaction to what they think about these innovative tools that have been discussed in the AIP task teams. So let me give our first question to Dr. Hubert Danso. He's the chairman of the African Union's Continental Business Network, the African Green Investment Bank, and the New York's Global Asset Owners Council, which represents over $20 trillion of assets under management and advisement. So Hubert, Africa has over $700 billion in assets under management. This could really even double and continue to increase. What is the potential that we could actually bring some of that to the water sector? And what has the task team been discussing? Over to you, Hubert.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, ministers, panel chairs, and members, and distinguished guests. Look, our Institutional Investor Task Group really welcomes, in the first instance, the high-level panel's endorsement of the importance of working with the institutional investment community. I think across the entire climate agenda, it's been recognized that if we've got about $3 trillion worth of nationally determined contributions, we know that the government purse can't manage that. We know that the multilateral development banks collective $1.5 trillion balance sheet cannot manage that. And it's only really that sort of domestic and global $150 to $200 trillion pool of institutional assets that can really come in and close these development, water, as well as climate-related financing gaps. So first of all, we're really pleased that the panel is really seeking to partner with us on that. But in particular, it's, the panel stated that that partnership should actually be done through the African Union's 5% infrastructure investment agenda, and specifically through a dedicated instrument called an institutional investor-public partnership. So I think as you rightfully identified, we're now looking to basically bring on board another 10 billion each year. There's a 700 billion pool of assets on the continent. The 5% agenda in itself is seeking to increase the allocations from African pension funds and African sovereign wealth funds from the current sort of 1.5% to around 5%. And we can see that growing or doubling over, in sort of years to come. So we believe just from that pool, there is the possibility to mobilize that additional $10 billion, even if you just take a mere 10% of that. So our actions specifically focused on assisting panel members implement these institutional investor public partnerships. Great to have all of these ideas on a piece of paper, but how do you actually operationalize them? And we believe that institutional investor public partnerships can accomplish that. We've got 4 ideas and 4 ways that we believe that can happen. The first is by advising on qualifying the investable, bankable pipeline of projects. There's one thing to put a list of projects together, and there's another thing to determine which of those projects actually align with the investment policy statements and mandates of institutional investors. So we can help qualify that. Secondly, assisting to de-risk these particular transactions. There's usually about a third of whatever the quantum required for these typical transactions that will actually need to be de-risked, some kind of underlying insurance or first loss or guarantees. We can help in that respect. Thirdly, improving access to the Multilateral Development Bank's Global Emerging Markets database. This is critical data which, because it hasn't been democratized to date, is costing African and emerging market governments about $15 billion each year in excess interest on loan payments, and even more in terms of lost opportunities. And then fourthly, we have until 2030, according to the higher level panel's targets and focus. So we really need to think about how can we do things a lot quicker. How can we cut through a lot of the red tape, and how can we really engage investors in a smart way? And we believe that the utilization and the employment of investor intermediation and deal room technologies to not only assist mobilize the 10 billion of institutional capital each year, but we can, through new technologies and new approaches, we believe that we can achieve between a 60 to 80% investor engagement efficiency in the particular process. So, Chair, those were the sort of the key things that came to light for us. We want to make this practical. We want to see it implemented, and we believe institutional investor public partnerships are working successfully around the world. And if we bring them to the continent, led by the African pension and sovereign wealth fund community, catalyzing our global institutional investment partners, we certainly believe we can meet and potentially exceed that target. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Hubert. The next task group was on debt finance, but mostly on national debt finance, national banks, national commercial banks, and even national microfinance institutions. And we have Ezekiel Ainalem from the Vision Fund Microfinance Institution in Ethiopia, which is the largest private microfinance institution from Ethiopia. Ezekiel, please tell us, what were the most promising recommendations coming from your task team? Please go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Warm greetings from Ethiopia. Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, and fellow high panel task team members. It is an honor to be speaking among you on the issue of water investment delivery across the African continent. So I'll just be going through some of the key actions that this task team has been looking at, developing and proposing. The first is, as most of you are aware, that most national banks, MFIs, commercial banks have not been very keen to invest in the water sector. So the first action plan is to develop the business case for water, including a national strategy to address this perceived and actual investment risks. So this will help increase banks and MFIs' knowledge of investment opportunities in the water sector. The other is to ensure political buy-in, which will reassure development banks to invest. The more political leaders and institution heads announce that they are willing to prioritize the water sector, that will reassure financial institutions to engage more and invest in the water sector. So the other action plan is like that. To sum it, just to clear to you, the action plans can be divided or summarized in two parts. The first is from the demand side, the other is supply, or from lender's perspective, or and the other from the borrower perspective. So the other is to ensure a project pipeline which is tailored for different lending opportunities with public and commercial banks. This will help lending institutions and project managers to engage with actual water projects, which will help investments in the water sector as well. The other action item that we've been looking at, we've been proposing to, is to create a conducive enabling environment to reduce the bottlenecks that have been with water lending, and including changing legal frameworks, providing de-risking instruments. Those are the other actions that we'll be looking for. From lending side, we've been looking at strengthening the water service providers to increase their credit worthiness. You know, if we bring, and when we bring these demands, or when the banks and national commercial banks are ready to invest, we've got to make sure the one receiving or the borrower is ready for investment. So that is the other area that we have been developing action plan towards. So this is strengthening the creditworthiness of service providers as well. The other is the final one, de-risking or subsidizing the interest rates of MFIs and commercial banks, so that those at ground level are willing to accept wash loans, water loans, and other services associated with that might have access to more affordable finance. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So concrete project pipelines are coming up now from a number of speakers. And so that is one of the critical components to actually getting investment into the sector. The third task team is really thinking about some ideas that may be a little bit newer to the water sector. And it's a task team on valuing water-related risks and internalizing the environmental costs. So the Carbon Disclosure Project has shown that almost 69% of listed equities are reporting exposure to water risks that will threaten their viability in the coming years. So water is really coming up as a huge business cost for all businesses in the countries. So we have Dr. Nicholas Igwe, who is the global head for the organized private sector in water and sanitation and hygiene, and the CEO of Zenith Water Project from Nigeria. So Nicholas, please tell us, what were the top recommendations, or maybe the top recommendation coming out from your task team?
Thank you so much, Jay, and please permit me to stand on the existing, protocol. And Jay, thank you, so much for bringing up the report from the Carbon Disclosure, project. And I want to also, restate this, which probably appears, if we must have seen the pyramid, the AIP pyramid of transformation, where you say that potential impacts of water risks, as reported by 99 countries in Africa, comes to approximately between 61 to 67 billion US dollars. Then coming to this, it means that several billions of US dollar water-related costs can surely be averted per year from improved water stewardship. Then the question now is that, what are those actions that, if taken, will be able to avert this? Number one is showcasing the cost risk of inactions, the potential economic implications of water-related challenges, as well as the economic, environmental, social, reputational benefits of improving water use efficiencies and wastewater pollution control and reduction. But of course, to be able to achieve that, just like we have also, mentioned, we must work, in collaboration with the academia, and that takes us to the second point in terms of research. This can be achieved through national studies to estimate the cost of investment needed to reduce the wastewater pollution. That means that each country has to obviously carry out those national studies to have the estimate the cost of investment that are needed to reduce the wastewater pollution. The second one obviously is strengthening regulators' capacities, regulatory and legal framework that are required to achieve the objectives. And this is only possible where there is a high-level political will from the sides of the national government. And I'm sure we have some ministers on stage as well, because whatever we're talking about in all the interventions, all the actions, with that strong political will coming from the side of the national government, it will be very difficult to achieve this. The next point is what everybody must have spoken about, technology innovation. In order to understand the level of extraction, consumption, pollution, and to make them public, we need technologies. These are technologies that are required to tracking and monitoring of water usage, pollution, even defaulters. And this will require, again, the participation of the CSOs, strengthening the CSOs to be able to hold the private sector accountable and in a very transparent manner. The next, obviously, is the financial institutions, obviously, who obviously give out, loans. When it comes to internalizing environmental, costs, we obviously have to hold the financial institutions accountable in terms of making sure that they introduce water due diligence in all loans that are related to water, and making sure that incentives are built in for companies and holding them accountable at the end of the day. The next is obviously when these other ones fails, we have to obviously put in default penalties, which will help in generating further revenues. In all, making environmentally damaging activities more expensive will go a long way to encourage the use of technologies for cleaner alternatives, which will create environmental economy, sustainable development, and this can only be achieved through the involvement of everybody that I've just mentioned, the line ministries, development partners, private sector organizations, the CSOs, and the academia. Finally, it is projected that several billions of dollars per year in water-related costs can be averted each year from improved water stewardship. And failing to do so, we can also recover billions of dollars from the polluters that can be used to compensate the downstream users. So these are some of the key actions that, if taken, will be able to avert billions of dollars, as I've mentioned. Thank you so much, and over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Nicholas. I think this is the type of innovative idea that is being really thought about in many countries around the world right now. And if the AIP were able to capitalize on this idea and push through better data collection and improved contracting between the public and private sectors, there is a real opportunity. The last task team was on the extractive industries. The total value of extractive industries in Africa is estimated at approximately $400 billion a year. And in this task team, the members discussed how this could actually bring to bear in increasing water sector investments. And representing this task team, we have Arshad Syed, who was until recently the managing director for Rio Tinto, one of the largest metals and mining companies in the world, and currently the CEO of Climate Action Systems, a innovative software platform designed for network collaboration. Over to you, Arshad.
Thank you, Jay. You know what they say, you save the best for last, but also you don't want to come in between your lunch in Stockholm there. So I will try and be really, really brief here and make one point, and that's one action really, which is how do you develop and enact policy and legislation for this tax increase? And in that, there are really three considerations that I would submit that came out from the discussions we had, and there's obviously a number of other actions. But the first is, how do you design this tax increase in a way that takes into account the diversity, the richness of the different countries, the varying economic conditions, and the significant role of the mineral extraction industry, but do it in a way that's the second consideration, which is fair and equitable, so that it does not also discourage investment in the mining sector. It's transparent and easy to administer. It is linked to the actual impact of mining on the water resources. And it is used to finance water management and conservation projects. Those are two main considerations. And a third consideration that came out, which is a more detailed kind of look at what might be the implementation roadmap for actually enacting this increase. And there are several considerations, and some of them obviously will need to be thought through in what is the sequencing of this. The first among them obviously is what is the legal framework, so that the framework is clear and avoids the kind of disputes that might be there because companies already have agreements in place with governments. What is the kind of feasibility study? What is the stakeholder consultation? How do you implement, whether it's gradual in different countries and staggered? How do you reinvest the money that is taken so it goes to the benefit of the water sector and for the communities in that region? And then how do you monitor and evaluate and create campaigns that will help the public understand what is going on? With that, let me stop so that you have a good discussion basis. Thank you.
Yes, the proposal coming out from this task team was whether there is a possibility to levy a 1% tax on that $400 billion of annual investment from the mining sector. If that could happen, that's an additional $4 billion a year of investment for water. So the task teams have come up with these ideas, and now I want to invite Dr. Oswald Chanda, who is the director of the Water and Sanitation Department from the African Development Bank. I mean, the African Development Bank, especially your department, has the eye over everything in the water sector that happens in the continent. So not to put you on the spot, Oswald, but please give us your reactions to some of the ideas that you've heard today, and how the African Development Bank and the Africa Water Facility could help to actually identify and push some of these recommendations.
I'll raise my voice, but I hope to online. And online. Thank you very much for these great insights that are being brought. And I see that, yes, we're thinking outside the box. We indeed looking at the very core areas that would help make a difference. A starting point, which I think, yes, we have made reference to it, but we might have glossed over it. And I want to take advantage of the presence of the honorable ministers in particular to face this challenge. And in everything that we have indicated, we see that the service providers, the utilities are at the core of the implementation. You know, the plans, the capturing of information, and the pace at which all these initiatives will be implemented is going to be determined by the utility, by the service providers. Now, this is so critical because the initiatives, the innovation, which are specific to the countries, will be driven by the utilities. Now, we have good policies, we have good strategies, we have good legislation. What is the failing point? Accountability in the appointment of the people that run these utilities. Accountability in their performance. You know, I'm sure in this conference we have heard people standing up and saying, we have 65% unaccounted for water, 50% unaccounted for water. Who does business and you lose 65%? If you are the MD, you are fired, you know. But we have managers of these utilities, because of the way they are appointed, mainly appointed by politicians, even presidents, no matter how they perform, nothing happens. But they affect the life of millions of people, you know. And so what we are asking for, honorable ministers, is leave the provision of water and sanitation services to be professional. Establish regulators that will hold these utilities accountable, you know. Let them be appointed on their capacity to deliver. It will make a huge difference. You know, much of the resources that we are talking about will come, and it will attract the people with the resources to come and invest, because you cannot invest in an organization that has 50% unaccounted for water. 50% of its business cannot be accounted for. It's very, very critical. So that we must address, and all these other things that we have talked about, which are great ideas, are going to start working. This is one of the biggest challenges. In terms of readiness, the utilities are very critical. The designs, the preparation of the documentation, it's all to be driven by the utilities. So that one is quite very critical. Now, in terms of cooperation and partnership, I see an increasing partnership between the banks, between the private sector, between the civil society, and all the different stakeholders, and it's working very well. However, there is need for strong leadership. There's need for strong leadership at the country level, you know, because yes, we are all interested. We are all very willing to mobilize resources to bring in other investors. It's not just the resources that we are sitting with as African Development Bank. We have other partners that once we have identified a good project are willing and put in resources to increase and to the volume of resources that can go in a particular country. So the leadership at the country level is quite very, very critical. We are willing to support, provide technical assistance to guide through that process so that we can leverage and bring a lot more resources into the sector to meet the SDG 6 and the other challenges that we are facing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That is in fact a perfect transition to our next speaker, who is Mike Webster. Until last month, Mike was in charge of water and sanitation in Cape Town, South Africa, and he's just now back at the World Bank as the manager of the 2030 Water Resources Group. So Mike, I don't know whether to address you as a member of the country or as a member of the MDB, but please share with us your perspectives about the potential for AIP. I think this one works.
Thanks a lot, Jay, and great to see you and everyone else, and all protocols observed with the politicians and the senior ministers. Very good to see this high level of participation in this kind of meeting. So immediately on that point, Jay, I think I want to buttress what Oswald was saying about the centrality of local government, of municipalities, of utilities in delivering this. And if we look at Cape Town as an example, so this is a large city, 4.5 million people. But I think Day Zero and all of those stories aside, at the heart of what we tried over the last 5 years was looking at the financial viability of the utility. And that's a factor of management, as Oswald was saying, efficiency measures like non-revenue water collection rates, tariffs, but also the trust of the politicians and the customers that you're actually delivering a product they want to pay for. And at the heart of it, that is the business model. So that trust was broken. That trust was broken during that Day Zero period. You know, meters, the tariffs were very high. So if you had a leak in your home, you could get a bill of R1 million or 2 million Rand. And that ability to collect was really seriously challenged. Our collection rate was down at 80%. But over a series of interventions, and some supported by technical assistance, we pushed that up to 95%. And that meant you had a revenue stream that could finance a much higher capital budget. So the capital budget has now risen from 2 billion Rand, which was the highest it's ever been, to 4 billion this year, 6 billion next year and 8 billion the year after. So this exact issue of scaling up finance requires that level of focus on the commercial aspects. And if you compare that to other metros in South Africa, the next biggest budget is Joburg, which is at 1 billion, and it has greater investment needs, but they don't have that same financial viability model, and the same with eThekwini and some of the other metros. So I very much buy at the heart of it is utility reform, utility management, and there is a role for outsiders to support that. Second point is around the World Bank. So there is a big focus at the moment for the World Bank to scale up investments in water globally and in Africa in particular. And I mean, Oswald and I were both at a meeting yesterday of the MDBs working on water globally. And there is a strong desire to work much more in concert with each other and to obviously with government leading, respond to this kind of challenge in a much more systematic way. So there's an open door from our institution on increasing lending where it's possible, but also doing that responsibly and through the appropriate technical assistance. And then lastly, just my job that I've just done for the last 2 weeks, so I'm trying to figure it out, is it's called the 2030 Water Resources Group. It's a trust fund managed by the World Bank, but actually supported by private sector donors. And this is all about trying to increase private investment in water security. So the idea is to set up multi-stakeholder platforms at the country level, and a number of these exists in India and in Bangladesh and in Kenya and a few other countries, but we want to expand that for a government-led platform on which private sector investment is driven to the most appropriate sectors. So if it's in the agricultural or the textile or the wash or whatever it is, to have that more systematic discussion at the highest level in government, sometimes by the Prime Minister or the Minister of Water or the appropriate official in charge of the sector. And for that, we're trying to expand that, and we're looking for more private investors, as well as expanding those multi-stakeholder platforms. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to move to the country level. And so sitting right next to Mike Webster, I'd like to invite Ms. Nchedi Moripe, who is the Chief Director for International Cooperation and Partnerships in the South African Water and Sanitation Directorate. Nchedi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jay. I think right away, I'm just going to say it's really good to be in this room because it's giving hope. When AIP started, I never had a dream to come to this level. At times we get concepts put together, documents put together, but you don't see them roll out. And when you listen to all the speakers in the room, you can see we're going somewhere. As a government representative, I'll say that we do have actions to take on board as governments. We do have to really make this happen, because if we are not talking governance, as Chanda already said, no one will want to come around us. If we are not telling how we are planning to finance our debts, we are not going to have anyone interested. If we are not going to say how we will try to improve on projects that will start and finish on time to avoid extra costs, we are not going to have anyone coming on, because our projects are going to be left open, no ending to anything. Therefore, I'm going to say that according to me, really in Africa particularly, water is the biggest demand for now. People on the ground, particularly the poor, go to the streets and say nothing, but just we need water and we need clean water. And with what is discussed in the room today, it's possible. It's possible. The AIP is giving us hope. The AIP is saying to us, to me, this is a project that just says, or a program that just says, let's do it together. Africa just put something on the table so that we can do it together and see how we can assist each other to try and tap into all the contributions from the bankers, from the organizations. Mike just said that they are there as banks, as lenders, as to come on board and assist. But with what the AIP is putting on table, we are clear that we've got working models. We have plans on the table. We have the how to do it. Ours is just to come on board as governments. And what I like about it is that at national level, it gives us an opportunity to do it in a way that a country will be able to follow it and to be able to process it. The help is there. I think it's more than learning from each other program. If Zambia have already started, if other countries are already on board, we can just go and tap in and see how they've started and where they're going and how far they've gone so far. Some of our countries in Africa are already on board and they're already moving. Therefore, it's for Africa. One day I was talking to someone and that person, AIP, I don't know about it, but I know that as we are going to be launching in September now, that will be some kind of a communication model where no country will say, I've never heard about it. We will all hear about it when our principals, when our head of states will be there talking about it loudly and proudly, saying, let's go into it and let's get water to everyone. I think we are there and I am happy. And I agree that if we look at the debts that are coming through, they start from, a household that's not paying because they don't see the services. They go to a water board that goes down because they're not paid by municipalities. They go up to organizations that are using bulk water, like your mining companies and what, that end up wanting to do it their own way because they don't see the services. But if all can be coordinated, I can tell you the water sector is the most sustainable sector that can bring every sector on board and get every sector working, because then we will have food security. Then we know the energy sector needs us. We know mining needs us. We can get bulk monies from there because when they get to use our services, they will pay back and will be able to pay our debts. We promise those who will bring money that will be able to pay, because now we're going to be organized. Thank you.
Thank you, Ncheti. Here. I'd like to give the final reflection to Dr. George Lugomela, who's the Director of Water Resources in the government of the United Republic of Tanzania. You are about to launch your water investment plan. And so what of the ideas that you've heard today, please tell us your reflections on the potential for AIP to contribute to development of water in Tanzania.
Okay, thank you very much. Honorable ministers present here and the online and the other distinguished guests. First of all, I'm pleased to be here in this session, AIP organization, to discuss the different issues related to water problems in Africa. So in Tanzania, you are right, we are about to launch the Tanzania Water Investment Program that is based on the AIP initiative. Our program is going to roughly $15 billion US. That is going to be invested in about 7 years up to 2030 in order to bridge or to reach the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals on water. So the Africa Investment Program, as it stands, it's actually going to be a game changer in water services, provision of water supply and sanitation. But we also know that water is key or pivotal in several sectors. The energy sector depends on water, agricultural sector depends on water, mining sector depends on water, and many other sectors. The health sector particularly, if we provide clean and safe water, we save a lot of money through the different waterborne diseases that are going to be reduced through provision of clean water. But we know that water resources management is key to most of the sectors that depend on water. And the water resources management in Africa is lagging behind because we don't have the data, or we have very few data that can provide for proper planning in the different sectors that use water. So the AIP is one of the, AIP is going to bridge the gap, at least in terms of the investment or the focus area that we are going to focus on. So in Tanzania, the key focus area that we are going to look at, the first one is water investment for social well-being. That obviously would improve the water supply and sanitation services in the country. The second focus area is water investment for economic development. As I mentioned, different sectors that depend on water. This third focus area, we are going to look at water governance and institution strengthening. It has been mentioned here that the water crisis is essentially a water governance crisis. So we need to improve the institutions, build the capacity in order to be able to deliver on water services, but also on water resources management. But we also need water investment for climate resilience and the disaster management. A lot of issues on the flooding that is happening, increased flooding due to climate change, but also droughts due to climate change. So we need to be able to manage these disasters so that we can harness the floods that are happening by building dams, and we get the water to be able to use during the droughts or during the dry seasons. So the government in Tanzania at the moment is spending roughly $300 million on water supply and sanitation services. And we should be able to increase, the government should be able to increase at least the 20% that has been mentioned here, that to attain the additional $2 billion from African governments. And we can do this through the increase in the government budget, but also we can have an additional, we can create an additional revenue that will go towards the water sector. Already the government has what we call the National Water Fund, which is specifically for the water sector. So it's possible to double the amount of money that is currently going to the National Water Fund. But we, of course, foresee challenges because obviously the other sectors will not be happy to reduce their share of the national budget. But the case needs to be made on the importance of water for, first of all, livelihood, but also the importance of the same in the other sectors. That if you take away a few dollars from the other sectors, what the same sectors are going to benefit as a result of improved services from the water sector. Improved water resources management is going to benefit the sectors, but also improved water supply and sanitation is going to benefit the health and the education sector. So the case needs to be made about the relevance of improved water supply and sanitation services, but also the water resources management. But lastly, we need to convince the politicians that water is central. We need their buy-in so that the high office, they can see that we need to improve more, to put more investment in the water, so that we can have clear impacts that are going to be demonstrated to the people, but to the economy at large. The economy basically is driven by water. So showing that improving the water resources management, we're improving the economy of our countries or economies of our country, is going to change the minds of our leaders, but it's also going to bring in more money into the water sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's really impressive to see the commitment and the leadership of Tanzania as you embark on your AIP journey. I think true to the themes of Water Week this year, the role of innovation in terms of innovative finances, innovative sources, innovative approaches is very critical to the overall AIP. And we have been, very lucky that so many investors and financiers who were not previously looking at water are actually starting to be drawn more in. And I know that we have also a participant who's joining us virtually, Adnan Hassan, who has been almost in every part of this kind of asset class, creating new asset classes. So I want to invite Adnan to actually share a few ideas on why he is so keen for water to become the new investable asset class.
Thank you very much, Jay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. And the session certainly is excellent. The crisis is real. The timing is right. The world is focused on the issue of climate and water. But to attract institutional investment, the sector needs to speak the language of investors. And one of those languages is about asset classes. And asset classes is how the sector or investors look at allocating funding. So my question essentially will be, which countries within the Global Water Partnership or the AIP can be leaders in the effort of creating that asset class and can anchor, for example, a water and sanitation hygiene fund? So the language of investors needs to be spoken. They are interested in return. We need to demonstrate the sector can offer those returns. They want impact, but ultimately we need to speak their language, and asset classes and funds is what they speak. So some countries will have to take the leadership role, and I think GWP and AIP can facilitate that process. And from an investor's perspective, that's something that is key to the next step. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Adnan. And thank you, everybody, for being very patient through this second dialogue. We really wanted to really expand on the theme of innovation, which is the theme of the Water Week. Let me pass over to Alex Similabwe, but maybe we could also just hear from the 8th Secretary General of the UN on the role of innovation.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to address you at the launch of the Water Changemaker Innovation Awards 2023, convened by our host, Global Water Partnership, K-Water, the World Bank, and the Continental Africa Water Investment Program, AIP. The Water Changemaker Awards is a program to acknowledge and promote high-level leadership and innovation that contribute to facilitating international water agendas. During the United Nations 2023 Water Conference in last March in New York, the Presidential Award was given to the global water leaders, and today we celebrate the launch of the competition program of the Innovation Award. I would like to congratulate His Excellency Mokgweetsi Masisi, President of the Republic of Botswana, for his chairmanship of this initiative, and my congratulations goes to the 6 laureates of the Presidential Water Changemaker Awards, who have demonstrated the high-level leadership improving climate resilience in the water sector. I recognize that the International High-Level Panel on Water Investments for Africa launched their report, Africa's Rising Investment Tide, during the United Nations 2023 Water Conference in March. This report outlines pathways to secure an additional $30 billion to achieve water security and sustainable sanitation on the continent by 2030 through the Africa Water Investment Program, AIP. This report is considered a significant and transformative outcome of this historic conference. The Continental Africa Water Investment Program, AIP, is endeavoring to narrow the water investment gap on the continent by transforming the investment outlook for water, and is one of the co-convening organizations of the Changemaker Awards. Water as a sector that needs innovation to solve the related global issues and the crisis. In order to reduce the water-related climate disasters, we urgently need to scale up initiatives like AIP in the vulnerable regions such as Asia and Latin America. While we need follow-through from the highest level of leadership, governments cannot do this alone. Climate-resilient innovations with the potential for scale-up and replication can expedite our progress by providing governments with the technologies and approaches that were not only previously unavailable, but that also have the potential to create sustainable jobs and improve livelihoods. It is my sincere hope that the Water Changemaker Awards will bring the best of these innovations to light and link them with the due finance sources to enable them to scale up. I wish good luck to all who enter the Water Innovation Changemaker Awards, and we look forward to seeing the outstanding winners at COP28 in Dubai. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we've come to a close now of the session. I would like, first of all, before I call the Republic of Senegal to close, to recognize once again the hosts and convener, the African Commission, in partnership with the high-level panel. We were welcomed by the AUC, and also this event, the global consultation for the high-level panel water investment plan session was officially opened by His Excellence President Hage Geingob, represented by the Minister here, Honorable Chetwin, who also gave us quite inspiring words in his previous roles, as well as Minister of Finance, a senior official in the Ministry of Finance, Minister of Trade, and of course, Minister of Water, but also in Agriculture, and also the former president of the African Ministers' Council on Water. And as I said, he was the pioneering champion in establishing the high-level panel when he first convinced his own president to be the first panel member to join as co-chair. So, Honorable Minister, on behalf of the Secretariat and President Jakaya Kikwete, we really thank you for the leadership role that you played. Also, thank you to the Kingdom of Netherlands, the former envoy who was here, Henk, Dutch Water Envoy, for their leadership, as well as UN Water, the Secretariat from UNDESA, for giving us inspiration around the UN Water Conference, the UN Water Action Agenda, and how this partnership that has been called upon, institutional public-private investment partnerships, can be a catalyst to work across all divides to help mobilize resources, but also address many other challenges. My special recognition to my own minister, Honorable Mike Mfosha, who was also gave a note in terms of what the Zambian government is doing, confirming that Zambian government and other countries can indeed increase the budget as has been recommended. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, recognizing your presence. But as well, my director as well, he's been my director since I was young as a student, Mr. Oswald Chanda, special recognition. Many of you don't know that he was one of my mentors and he remains so. So Mr. Oswald Chanda, very busy man, thank you for joining us as well with your staff from the Africa Development Bank, together with my colleague, Michera, the coordinator for the Africa Water Facility. Thank you very much. And the World Bank have just left, but thank you very well as well. And the Global Environmental Facility, Astrid was also here joining us. It is difficult, honorable ministers that are here, panel members, for me to acknowledge all the many experts that you've seen, the wisdom that has been shared. When the idea of task team was proposed, I initially resisted it, and I was told, you're not the panel, you're a secretariat, do what we tell you. And indeed, you can see the amount of expertise that we've been able to mobilize, partners that actually don't engage necessarily on water, but in terms of what they have been able to show. So as we will move forward to New York next September, the high-level panel, we will launch the campaign to mobilize resources at the UN General Assembly. We look forward to cooperating with the Republic of Senegal, the African Union Commission, and the leader of the panel. So thank you very much. Remarks from the Secretariat for your support, online viewers, and the people that are here, and my colleague as well, who worked with very closely to get this together. It is now my honor to invite the Republic of Senegal, the leading co-chair, to close this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Honorable ministers, dear Oswald from FDB, distinguished participant, I would like to end this meeting to saying that this meeting was a success. This meeting was a success because we have learned a lot about story from countries, about story from multi-stakeholders in water. At the end of this session, I would like to quickly draw some lessons learned from our exchanges. I just highlight 3 of them. Oswald highlighted the fact that we need to mobilize resources. We need strong leadership at the country level, but also we need strong leadership at the continental level, at the African region levels. We need strong leadership at ECOWAS level, SADC, etc. We need to strengthen water at the top agenda of African Union. Water is politics also. We need to have head of state mobilizing about water in Africa. We need strong water policy to strengthen water financement, to mobilize more financement for Africa, and to do more projects on the ground. We are off track for the SDGs. We need to go faster if we want to be to attend good points for the SDGs. We need to mobilize all players, but not only water players. We need to think and to mobilize actors outside the water box to bring them in water. It's very important if we want to mobilize more financing. We must learn from agriculture sectors, from mining, from environment, from finance sector. It's very important if we want this. But we need also to mobilize bilateral order in philanthropy, African government budgets, national and domestic resource mobilization is essential if you need to increase our budgets in water sectors. We need to do more efforts on mobilizing financing, national budget financing. The sector governance also efficiency, gain and cost savings is essential. Multilateral development finance institution, multilateral climate funds, because water and climates are sisters. We need the crisis of water is the same that the crisis of climate. We need to join efforts around agenda, international agenda, climate agenda, water agenda, finance agenda, and other agenda that we have all over the world. Next step, Alex talk. The next step is New York. We intend to mobilize head of states to launch the campaign of the Africa Investment Program action plan. It's very important. And we intend to mobilize all head of state members of the panel and to mobilize also multilateral and development financing institution to be sure that we have all actors involved, that African investment program can be a reality in few months, few years. If we mobilize all actors, it's possible. This is the message that I want to say and congratulate all participants, the high-level participant of the minister who is here since the beginning of the meeting, show that we have a big interest for Africa to mobilize all actors for the financement, for infrastructure, if we need to meet the SDGs, not in 2030, it's late, but in few years after 2030, maybe, we have to cross finger, and it's important to raise this water at the highest level, at the political level, if we want to meet these goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you and goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Mark. How are you?